Okay, well, welcome to not quite my podcasts, but the new, more pro YouTube presentations. Hope you like the intro. I'm not sure what intro I'm going to be showing you at this moment in time, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. Okay, so today we're going to talk about training and training intensities, and it's a question I kind of get a lot of is, and I know a lot of the people that follow me are sort of from Flow's podcast, and that there's a lot of low heart rate training, or the full maffetone method or MAF method. And so we're going to just chat about heart rate training and what it is that you should and shouldn't be doing, and try and sort of get an overall perspective of all of this. So you'll see I've got a pen. I was going to speak into the microphone, but then I realized I have a microphone. I don't know, I got my influencer glasses on. I got my headphones on. How can you not trust what I'm about to say? Anyway, okay, so pretty much, if you don't know me, these aren't edited very much at all. So if I waffle, I'm sorry. And we try to sort of we try to do this all in one take. Okay. So let's just unpack this, and we'll go through the sort of different zones. Basically, we'll do understanding sort of intensity zones. I've got notes. We're taking this very seriously. We'll talk about low heart rate or zone 2 kind of training. We'll talk about sweet spot and lactate threshold training just a little bit. I mean, this is not to give you a PhD in endurance training. We'll talk about the 80-20% rule. And then two big influencers in this space that have quite a lot of influence, which I'm just going to touch on. I'm going to let them influence in their way, is Dr. Stacy Sims and Dr. Peter Attia. They have very sensible representations of sort of training in these zones and the importance of it. And then we'll talk about sort of how much you need to train per week in these zones, right? So the first thing is, personally, MAF training or Dr. Full Maffetone just about saved my life. So I was a student, and I'm going to have a sip of water. All right, now that we got that out of the way. So I was a student back in the day, and I was just training too hard, and I was just trying to train everything and crush it, and we didn't really have books. And Dr. Full Maffetone was this voice of reason in all the madness, certainly in what I was experiencing. And he talked about the Maffetone method, which is you take 180 and you minus your age, and you shouldn't train higher than that. And the philosophy being is that I can't actually remember if I nailed down exactly what his philosophy. I don't want to paraslave them, but basically you build up this big, healthy aerobic base. It's not that stressful in your body, and you basically get stronger and stronger while building this large aerobic base. And then there were modifiers to the Maffetone method. So in other words, you could if you'd been sick frequently, you'd -5. If you'd been really sick, you'd -10. Or if you're unfit, and if you hadn't been injured or sick in a year, you could +5 and maybe bump up that zone a little bit. So that was Dr. Full Maffetone, and at the time it was pretty extraordinary. Just like an insight or a sort of understanding. I was trying to rationalize a lot of this sort of, and trying to train better, and he was training Mark Allen, and I thought this was just the bee's knees, so this is what we sort of tried to do. And a good friend of mine was adamant on the Maffetone method, and then there was this Maffetone method is often associated with low carbohydrate, maybe, or zone. Back then it was the zone diet. It was 40-30-30, so 40% carbs, 30% fat, 30% protein. We had Professor Tim Noakes at that stage saying 80% of your diet should come from carbohydrates and 10% protein and 10% fat. He since did a complete 180 and now basically says if you never eat a carbohydrate as long as you live, you'll be fine, including babies. So that was quite a big shift from Professor Noakes, but certainly I wasn't thriving under the 80% carbohydrate and probably training too hard at the time. So that was a big change and a big shift for me. So there we go. There's my sort of intro into this sort of world. Now having a bit of perspective and having coached athletes at a reasonably high level, and we sort of want to zoom out and try and unpack all of this. And I think the most important thing is generally speaking now, at one stage there were different zones. So there were only 3 zones or 5 zones or 7 zones, or there are 10 zones, or we were training on RPE and heart rate monitors. It just kind of come out. So there was a lot going on and a lot to unpack, right? But in terms of intensity zones, broadly speaking, there's 1 to 5. Okay, 1 is really easy, probably most people's walking. Zone 2 is also pretty easy. Depends who you sort of speak to, but zone 1 will be called active recovery, is another name for zone 1. And it's sort of below 60% of your maximum heart rate. Your aerobic base, which is zone 2. So active recovery basically helps in muscle recovery, and that's pretty much, from a physiologist's point of view, all it does, right? And it'll help with fat burning. It's probably considered by most too easy to make a difference or move the needle. Okay, certainly you don't see very many elite athletes running around in zone 1. Okay, zone 2, aerobic base, enhances fat oxidation, builds endurance, low risk of injury. The magic sort of behind zone 2 would probably be because you use quite a bit of fat metabolism. You kind of preserve your muscle glycogen levels, and so you can train quite a lot and get a large dose of training in, but you can recover quite quickly and it's quite easy on your body. Okay, zone 3, tempo, moderate effort, improves aerobic threshold. It's sort of on the sweet spot training maybe. Zone 3 is probably where people instinctively want to train in order to improve their fitness. I think if you're unfit and you start training, you're probably going to train somewhere between zone 3 and zone 4. Maybe even higher, maybe zone 5, because a lot of people, when they're unfit and they start running, they actually have to walk. So you have the self-regulating mechanism where you run, I'm too tired to sustain running, and then you walk. So that would be probably zone 5 or zone 4. It's certainly not a pace you could hold for an hour, otherwise you wouldn't be walking. Okay. So when I think instinctively people train at zone 3 or harder, because it's sort of what moves the needle, or you can almost feel your fitness improving. Or like, I did work now, I felt my muscles burn and I worked hard and I put it in, and there was sweaty red face and things move the needle. So I think that pretty much somewhere between zone 3 and 4 is where people instinctively want to train. And then zone 4 will be lactate threshold. Okay, hard efforts boost speed and endurance. And then zone 5 or VO2 max, high intensity bursts, improve maximum aerobic capacity. You can sort of get into, there's anaerobic thresholds, and VO2 max are sort of different energy systems, and kind of how you train and structure the intervals will make a difference for that, right? So kind of like the science and the benefits of zone 2. Oh, so if we go back to, you're going to hear about zone 2 a lot, okay? If we unpack this, if we look at like what is 180 minus, do the math for me. So 180 minus my age, how old am I? I skipped a birthday because when I flew to New Zealand, I didn't have a birthday. So I'm 1 year younger than I should be. So my birthday is, how old am I? I don't know. I was born in 71 and it's 2005. So I think I'm 74 I'm 53 turning 54 this year. Right. So 53. So for convenience sake, my math heart rate would be about 127. So if I was doing full Matherson's method, when I trained, I wouldn't go higher than 127 heart rate, right? If you unpack that and you go sort of 220 minus your age to find what your maximum heart rate is. So that's, I don't know, 167 would be my maximum heart rate, which I don't think it is. So if the most accurate way it would be to test it. So if I tested my maximum heart rate and worked out sort of my zone 2 level, that'd actually be pretty similar. Okay, probably a little bit lower than Dr. Phil Maffetone's, and certainly back in the day, Dr. Maffetone's method for me, and then I was doing maximum heart rate tests and I was pretty dialed with this stuff, would be probably just above zone 2, so slightly harder than zone 2. Let's call it zone 2.3. Okay. So the science and benefits of zone 2 is basically the highest level of intensity where your blood lactate remains below 2 millimoles per liter. Okay. Some people's physiology is a little bit different. It depends who's writing the textbooks. Okay. And it's typically 60 to 75% of your VO2 max. Okay. Or I think 65 to 70% of your maximum heart rate, or 75%, 60 to 75%. I can't remember. I get confused with the numbers. I think it's 65 to 75% of maximum heart rate. Okay. And really importantly, it's the zone that you can hold conversation pace. So you should be able to talk and chat while you're doing zone 2 training. And that's really, really important. And why is it so important? Well, mitochondrial efficiency, your mitochondria, and we'll come back to mitochondria, is really, really important. Okay. And also fat oxidation. You burn a larger percentage of fat. Okay. For people in terms of health benefits, maybe you're not into performance enhancing, you just want to train and live long and be awesome for a long time. It enhances your insulin sensitivity and lowers your risk of cardiovascular disease. So that's, for health benefits, it's a really good idea to train in zone 2. And it's basically the foundation, or the base with which you build your entire endurance engine. Okay. Again, we talk about Peter Attia. He's pretty much in the longevity. He's recommending 3 to 5 hours a week of this. Okay. And he likes tracking blood lactate, and you're talking about 65 to 75% of maximum heart rate in your zone 2. Okay. So that would be kind of zone 2 in a broad base, kind of similar to Dr. Phil Maffetone, what he's saying, except Dr. Maffetone, basically with the math method, has a hard cap on zone 2. And so you don't really ever go over, certainly not for, I think, the first 3 or 4 months, you don't go over your math limit. And then you do a maximum aerobic function test where you run along on a treadmill, and you'll see how fast you can run for the same heart rate. So you really are trying to sort of build from the bottom up, with a hard cap on top of your aerobic base that you're building foundation. Okay, so here we come in between sweet spot training and the 2 lactate thresholds. So you've got 2 lactate thresholds: LT1, which is your aerobic threshold, which is about 2 millimoles per liter lactic acid of blood lactate, and that's pretty much sort of zone 2. Okay. And then your anaerobic threshold is about 4 millimoles per liter, which aligns with tempo or sweet spot. Okay. That's basically your inflection point. And I used to be really dialed in exercise physiology, and it's not my jam anymore. So don't shoot me if I'm wrong. Just gently correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. If there's details that need ironing out here. Okay. So sweet spot will sit somewhere between there, and it gets a good rap. I think instinctively people train at that. There might be like Orange Theory, or this sort of, you can sustain long intervals at this pace. So I know when I was preparing for Ironmans, we'd often do big gear sweet spot training. So it's kind of like your Ironman race pace, and we'd spend a lot of time. It's certainly harder than zone 2. It's not that difficult for the first 20 minutes or so, and then it starts getting harder and harder. But it's somewhere between, on your power curve for cycling, would be somewhere between more than an hour, because 45 minutes to an hour would be your lactate threshold. So above that, you're basically what your power that you could sustain for sort of 90 minutes. And we'd accumulate quite a lot of time in there, and it's very fatiguing, but it makes you very strong and resilient. And it certainly moves the fitness needle in the short term. But again, this is like my one coach who I really respected said, "Fitness is a cake. You need all the ingredients." Okay. So there we go. For running, probably, you'd be 3 times 10 minutes at tempo pace, not 45 minutes in an hour at sweet spot training. It's slightly different. Okay. And then we have the Norwegian method of double threshold runs. And again, those are actually probably easier than you might think, but also the same sort of thing. You're really teaching your body to clear blood lactate and repurpose it. So you use your lactate again. Okay. And it, for whatever reason, well, for many reasons, but you basically, if you double threshold runs on the same day, seems to really move the fitness needle. Okay. So it's got very, very popular. Okay. So that would be kind of sweet spot, somewhere in between the two. Okay. And then lactate threshold a little bit harder. Okay. Kind of like I'm going to cut this. Okay. Then along came from, and again, remember, like, I've said this before, but I think this is kind of a boring talk. I'm going to have to spice these up. I've said this before. At the moment, exercise physiology is pretty dull. Like, we pretty much know what to do. Rehab, we pretty much know what to do. Like strength, we pretty much know what to do. We don't really have to run around trying to reinvent the wheel. I think the focus should be on, if you're not responding to basic training and basic strength and basic rehab, you need to start thinking why, rather than getting too involved in trying something different. So if you're not responding, perhaps you're the problem, not the program. Okay, gently. Okay, so there is something to be said about that. But anyway, along came, I think he's a doctor. He's probably smart enough to be a doctor, Stephen Seiler, and he basically came up with, I think he came up with the 80-20 perspective, where 80% of the training of all elites that the vast majority of elites do, 80% of their training is easy or aerobic or zone 2, and 20% is hard. And that's the 80-20 rule. And it's in successful endurance programs, that's pretty much the norm. So, there we kind of have it. Okay, so that's easy. Do 80% of your so if you run 5 times a week, 4 of those runs are on zone 2 or conversation pace. You don't need a heart rate monitor to figure this stuff out. Can you yak and talk the whole time? I'm much more. I wish they'd invented respiration monitors and focused on that rather than heart rate monitors. I think your ventilation threshold changes quicker than your heart rate. It's more accurate than your heart rate, probably in terms of intensity. And most people's biofeedback sinks into, when you're running, you might not be aware of your heartbeat, okay, but you're always aware of your breathing. And so I prefer almost respiration rate as a feedback mechanism. And certainly, I used to know when I was swimming, like if I couldn't bilaterally breathe, I was swimming too hard in an Ironman race. And, all my paces in the pool were associated with breathing patterns. And when I run, my conversation pace, I don't have to be talking. I know it's kind of 4 breaths in and 4 steps in and 5 steps out. And if I'm running along at 4 steps in and 5 steps out, it's easy enough. And that very, very quickly changes with intensity. So anyway, I like I say, there we go. I'm more interested in respiration rate than I am in heart rate. Okay. So anyway, so if you're doing 80-20, you'd do 4 runs at conversation pace, and then the one would be hard. And typically you could sort of choose what kind of intensity running you'd want to do. Okay. As I say, you can sort of, I don't know, it's, this obviously rapidly gets very, very, it becomes a rabbit hole, or becomes very sort of complex. Are you going to do hills? Or when do you do hills? Do you do short hills, long hills? Are you on the track? Are you doing short speed, long speed, intensity, VO2 max, anaerobic, whatever, but basically, you get to choose what speed work session your 5th run is. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit about dose of training and how many hours a week you need to train to meet your goals. And then, because you might find an elite athlete, they'll do 2 speed sessions a week. But that's because they run much more. It's still 80-20, probably, mostly. Okay. We're going to segue into Dr. Stacy Sims. So Dr. Stacy Sims coined the phrase, I think, women are not little men, which I love and massively respect and appreciate, because they're just not the same. Okay. And so remember, we were going back to often Dr. Math's method initially because of the zone and because of carbohydrate sensitivity, and because of which is all perfectly valid. Most humans eat way too much sugar. It is often associated with low carb. But females are very, very different when it comes to low carb and fasting. So for me, and also females during different periods of their cycle of completely their metabolism completely changes. So just because a female can do faster training at one part of the cycle doesn't mean they can do and respond well to fasting in all parts of their cycle. And generally speaking, for females, especially young females, okay, as you get older, things change a little bit, but in young females, if you cut out sugar or enough carbohydrates, you basically stop their menstruation. And we don't want to stop menstruation in young females. Okay, but anyway, So it's worth noting for Dr. Stacy Sims that as you get old as a female, she's very much against, and I don't want to, you please listen to her explain it because she's dialed, okay? She's very much against, and I don't want to misrepresent her, very much against sweet spot or orange or hard endurance training, and even too much zone 2, okay? Because basically, as you get older as females, you really need to preserve your muscle mass, protect your hormones, and preserve your bone density. And so she's massively into prioritizing strength and high interval intensity training, HIIT training, which, you know, for me, all of these things got names and then people bought into them and then drank the Kool-Aid and then blew something up, and I really believe in this. And I'm pretty sure the comments below are going to reflect that I misrepresented high intensity interval training, or I don't really understand low carb or ketone or whatever, you know, like whatever your favorite name or nomenclature is. And as I like to tell people, try not to become too attached to dogma or fads or whatever, because they change. You know, like I say, you know, Professor Noakes at the time had wrote The Law of Running. He's probably one of the most respected running physiologists, exercise physiologists in the world. He went from 80% carbohydrates to never eat a carbohydrate again as long as you shall live. Okay, it's quite a big swing. So you got to be quite careful when you start to attach yourself emotionally to let's call it dogma in the correct sense of the word. Okay, so the other thing with Dr. Stacy Sims is train according to your menstrual cycle, which means you do hard efforts in the first phase of your menstrual cycle. So the first 14 days, your follicular phase, and then you tend to focus on easier training, technique, and recovery in the luteal phase, which is the second half of your menstrual cycle. And like I say, somewhere in between there, I'm not exactly sure. I think it varies a little bit, but it seems like a lot of females' fat metabolism sort of stops. So what I mean by this is like, let's say females that are doing a fasted ride can totally tolerate it, and then round about on your menstrual cycle, you'll often find females just absolutely are not great at metabolizing fat, or can't do fasted rides, and find they need carbohydrates and they need more fuel. And they also, but I've never really nailed it down, and I suppose I should apply my mind to it and do a bit of a deeper research. But it's also along the lines of some women race exceptionally well on their menstrual cycle, and some women race terribly on their menstrual cycle. So I'm personally not, I don't know. I don't have a strong understanding of exactly when your sort of fat metabolism shifts, but it does certainly seem to shift around, and everyone's, you know, for you, it might be a big deal. And for others, not such a big deal. Okay. And then for females, again, postmenopausal women should increase resistance training and intensity to sort of maintain muscle mass. Okay. So generally speaking, females should stay away from zone 3 or the mushy middle. Okay. So zone 3 is, let's call it the mushy middle. Okay. It's because it's too hard to be easy and too easy to be hard. Okay. But like I said, it's almost that instinctive, this feels like the right pace to train at. You know, so a lot of unstructured training, or a lot of amateurs will just gravitate to zone 3. And then there's, I don't know, Orange Theory and a couple of other things which say that that's the best bang for buck, because your heart rate's the highest, you can sustain it the lowest, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So Dr. Sims is basically stay out of that. And I think Peter Attia is very much into zone 2. He's fascinated by zone 2. Again, it's just, dude, it's as old as time. Any sustainable running culture, if you just go down, you know, and people run, they'll yak and talk, and they run at conversation pace. They do long runs at conversation pace. I mean, the amount of, you know, the fondest memories I have literally of living in Durban were long runs where we all just, you know, go for a long run and shoot the shit. And, you know, everyone's talking and yakking, and you know people are starting to run too hard when people stop talking. So anyway, so there we go. Now let's focus on how much zone 2 per week. So for health and longevity, science is kind of talking about 2 to 3 hours per week. I think Dr. Attia, see, this is why I have notes, is 3 to 5 hours a week. Okay, so not too far from 2 to 3 hours a week. Or optimum is 3 to 5 hours per week. And this is probably running. Okay, so cycling kind of, as although it's a good cardiovascular stimulus, it's not quite as strong a stimulus as running, right? So I tend to have the 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 rule. So a 30-minute run, in my mind, is equivalent of an hour on the bike or 90 minutes on the cycle, on a bicycle. Okay. So optimal for health and longevity, 3 to 5 hours of running per week. Okay. And again, insulin sensitivity, fat oxidation, cardiovascular health, cognitive health, brain function, delayed Alzheimer's. It's really cardiovascular exercise is the business, right? For high performance, okay, so now we're not worried about health and longevity. We want to have a good half marathon time or whatever it is that you want to do. So for amateur athletes, probably 5 to 7 hours a week of running. Okay, so that's going to correlate to 50 Ks a week, I think. I wrote this down so I wouldn't have to do math on a microphone, and then I didn't put it on these notes. Okay, let's just go, you're running 10 kilometers an hour. So 5 hours of that would be 50 Ks. Yeah, so 50 to 70 Ks a week if you're an amateur will get you pretty fit for running. For competitive athletes, so you want to qualify for Boston, 7 to 10 hours a week. So suddenly your running is going from about 70 Ks up to 100 Ks in that sort of bandwidth, which I think is, people that want to break a silver marathon, would run sub 3 hours for a marathon in South Africa, were typically training about 80 Ks a week, 90. And then elite endurance athletes, 10 to 15 hours. So I know here in the States, it's a big deal. They like to run 100 miles a week. Okay, so if you're running, elite athletes will probably, if they're running zone 2, it's 14 Ks an hour. So 10 hours will give you 140 kilometers a week. So it's pretty easy to get to on 10 to 15 hours to get into that 100-mile range. Okay, and some of them are running 120 miles a week. So that's what's considered appropriate for running an elite marathon. Okay, so there we go. I think now this is the reason you've been listening to this, hopefully, is the perspective on this. So I think the commonest problem is that we have people who, they get injured or they break down at around about, let's say, 50 kilometers a week. And so they run less than that. They're running 30 kilometers a week or 40 kilometers a week. I run about 40 Ks a week. And so you end up in this position, if you run more, you're going to get injured or hurt, or you don't have time, okay? But you want to get the best benefits of it. And we talked about the zone 2 and how important it is, and it builds up your aerobic base, or you're doing the Maffetone method. But often when you're running that little, okay, and with respect, I say that little, it's a hell of a lot more than some people can't run at all. Some people are couch potatoes. Some people think that exercise is bad for you. So with respect, when you're running 30 to 40 kilometers a week, and you don't come from a big cardiovascular background, remember at some stage I was training 40 hours a week. Okay, so, and I swam when I was young, and I walked a lot. So if you grew up moderately sedentary, you didn't do a ton of sport, you weren't like a swimmer, that just cranked out miles in the pool and built this massive aerobic engine, you might find that you don't have that big an engine, aerobic base, okay, because you never developed it at some stage in your life. And you're going to find that on 3 to 4 hours a week of running, or 2 hours a week of running, or you're running 20 Ks or 30 Ks, it's not enough to run well and enjoy running. So running, and I want you to enjoy running. That's I should have just started this. This is how I should have started the podcast. Okay, we want you to enjoy running and have a sense of satisfaction, and you're competent enough that you enjoy it. Okay, like I'm too embarrassed to play the guitar in front of people because I'm not competent enough to express myself, which is something I need to work on. Okay, so now what? Okay, and so you're going to find, like for me, I think you might be following the full Maffetone method, and you're keeping your heart rate low, and you're just not getting anywhere, or you're running so slowly. It's actually difficult to run with good form slowly, and so you don't progress, and you sort of shuffle along. And there's no sense of judgment from me on how fast you're running or how well you're running. I just want you to enjoy your running. So you might find that you're stuck in this zone of you're not running enough, and you're not running fast enough to almost generate enough force to get on the plane, as it were. So think of a boat. So when they go, they're sort of stuck in the water, and then as you go faster, they pop up on the water, and then they get going. So I think with running, there's a critical speed where everyone, and it's sort of different for everyone, runs a little bit better. And you might find you're so obsessed with keeping your heart rate low that you can't find your running speed, which is why I sort of suggest to people start running with a walk-run program rather than a continuous running program, because when you run and your form goes, you should walk and refresh. And then when you only run with good form. So perfect practice makes perfect. So if you're resonating with what I'm saying and you're frustrated and you're not improving, you're probably not training enough hours per week. Okay, and the safe way to add hours per week, I'm just going to tell you straight out, is just walk. Zone 1. That's the one for you. So let's say, but that's time consuming, but we're going to figure out how to squeeze more walking time into your life. Okay. An athlete today said, I choose to walk during the week so that I don't walk when I race. Okay. Anyway, walking can really, really add aerobic fitness and base training to walking. And I'm doing a big podcast on walking. Okay. So add walking. And what you'll find, and then you can be a little naughty and you could possibly be training at that, remember that sweet spot, that zone 3, which is probably too hard to be easy and too easy to be hard. Maybe that's the pace where you actually feel quite good when you're running. You feel like a runner, you're hitting the ground, you've got turnover, you've got enough energy in your running to run well. I mean, you must understand that, you know, I work with an athlete now and her zone 2 is like, oh God, I don't want to mess this one up. You know, she can run 440 minutes a K, or like, I don't know, like 7 30-minute miles or 7-minute miles at zone 2. I mean, you know, really elite athletes will clip along at a very appropriate, like a very quick pace, and it's conversational pace for them. They are not running hard, they are running easy. Their heart rate is low. Okay, so you might find that what you need to do is just add walking into your running program, and then kind of break the rules and not worry too much about your heart rate, and get up into zone 3. It's fine, especially if you're under 4 hours. If you're under 3 hours a week of running, I seriously would not worry how high my heart rate goes. I would be respectful of what I'm doing, and I'm not giving you permission to be a numpty. What you want to do is you want to run until you feel like your form stops, and then walk, and then to freshen up, and then run again and do a run-walk program, okay? And your heart rate will drop in between the two, and your average heart rate will probably be very close to zone 2 at the end of those sort of runs, but while you're running, your heart rate will sort of climb. And then go for walks. And when you go for walks, don't walk fast. And how much walking do you need? You probably need at least 3 to 4 hours of walking a week as well. So now suddenly you're getting up into 8 hours of endurance activity a week. Some people don't have the time to walk. I would suggest that you listen to podcasts and go for walks, or you take meetings and that you can on the phone, and go for walks on that. There's people doing walking treadmills, or if you're lucky enough at home you have a treadmill, you can do some of your calls walking on the treadmill and talking. I mean, I could be on a treadmill walking now and talking to you. So you could walk after dinner to help you aid your digestion. A 20-minute walk in the evenings is fantastic. You could move to Europe. Okay. So when we were in Paris, it was extraordinarily how much walking we did, whereas in America we have a driving-based country, so you just drive everywhere. No one walks anywhere. Or you could cycle, or you could swim. So you could add in extra aerobic fitness that is easier than zone 2. So let's say, like, if all your running is zone 3, you probably want to be a little lighter on your other training. So easy cycling, just go for long hikes. I mean, one 3-hour hike on the weekend pretty much solves your walking conundrum. You only have to do another 2 40-minute walks during the week, and suddenly you're in 5 hours of walking a week. Okay, so that would be my recommendation, and that easy walking really, really does burn fat. And also, some people aren't genetically, I think everyone's run is improvable. So hopefully, if you're following me, you figure out the flow rope and head over foot and learn to stack your joints, because that'll really help with your running efficiency. And if you doing resisted walking with a tie and you figured out hip extension based gait, hopefully your running talent or ability opened up. And then we want to focus on stacking your joints. So you want to work on your ankle alignment and really being kind to yourself and walking in a way that doesn't hurt you. The most important thing with walking or exercise or all of this is you need to move in a way that's not harmful to your body. And there's too many people saying, I'm doing zone 2 and therefore I'm doing the right thing because Peter Attia said so. and I can do no wrong with this. Okay, you need to listen to your body. There's a lot of influencers and hackers and people with the best of intentions that got out there and influenced people that are having knee replacements and back surgery and can't run anymore and messed this whole thing up. So technique matters. You need to run in a way that doesn't inflame your joints or cause injury. Okay, and this is where you need to be self-aware, and it's difficult because people are like restricting calories to lose weight because then they run faster. And that's not, can we understand if we zoom out and look at the big picture, then that's just not healthy, and that's not how it should be, right? We're putting the cart before the horse. A lot of the time we talk about a mitochondria. If you're relaxed and you have a sort of parasympathetic and autonomic nervous system, healthy autonomic nervous system, you will burn more fat. Okay, so a lot of the time, like let's say Dr. Phil is trying to, with his math method, is trying to make your energy systems healthy again. I promise you, if you calm your autonomic nervous system down and go out for long walks in nature and calm your autonomic nervous system, you'll probably find that one is you can run faster for a lower heart rate when you do go and do Dr. Mathetone's method, but it's extraordinary how quickly your mitochondria can respond to a healthy environment. We see massive shifts, like 20% change in performance overnight, whereas most people are grinding out 3 or 4 months to try and get a 5% response out of their fitness. So environment, how you treat yourself, how you view yourself, who you surround yourself with, and then exercising in a way that doesn't inflame and hurt your joints. Okay, it's not it's not like, oh, I've done zone 2, therefore I can do what I like and run through pain. You don't get to break the rules and conjure up like, and with this is with love and respect and care. I've made all the mistakes you've done. You don't get to try and jerry-rig the system or cheat the system. Okay, so it's really, really important that you move in a way that respects your joints and that running doesn't hurt and break you down. And some people have a hard time with this, or it takes time. And if you're one of those people, I strongly suggest you swim a little bit to increase your cross-train. You build up some cardiovascular fitness swimming or aqua running. Just go and run in the water. Or you hike and walk, which is much easier on your joints. Not everyone was born to run. Everyone was born to walk 100%. And we have the ability to run, or hopefully the privilege to run. And like I say, I think don't break yourself running or hurt yourself running. And I certainly have very many friends that have run too hard or too intense or tried too hard with running. And the gift of running has been taken away from them. They can't run anymore. A lot of them ended up being very good cyclists because they could still cycle, but they couldn't run. But, you don't want to be that person. You don't want running taken away from you. And I had a conversation with a lovely lady, and she's saying, the grind for a marathon. Don't grind. I mean, unless, I'm going to go run the London Marathon soon, and I'm very grateful for that and the massive opportunity, but I'm certainly not going to shorten my life or the lifespan of my knees or grind and break myself down and suffer through a marathon. The marathon will be tough, and it'll be a privilege to sort of get to a point where you have to suffer and use your resilience and your mental fortitude to get through. But I'm certainly not going to be beating myself up for the next 10 weeks to try and sort of run a marathon. A marathon's hard. That's it. It's you don't get to train harder and make a marathon easy. I think there's an appropriate amount of work to do, okay? And certainly, someone that runs 100 kilometers to 100 miles a week has a very different experience when they run a marathon. But the speed, I'm not trying to win. I'm not trying to age group. I'm not trying to do anything. So, you want a healthy, like, what is it that you want out of life? And, too many people, I think, are over-inspired and try too hard and suffer. And what did Prefontaine say? To anything less than whatever is to sacrifice the gift. I personally think, like, you must realize that one day you'll run your last PB. So whatever you do in running is fleeting. It's a temporary gift. It's not yours. Okay, that's a healthy way of looking at it. Running is a gift that you're privileged enough to curate for a while. Okay, and some people get to run until they're 90, and other people don't get to run their whole life, or some people will never in their life run. Okay, and like I say, born to run, not so sure. Inuits. Sorry, I don't want to be disrespectful at all. So the Inuit, and Eskimos, they've developed short limbs, very big calves to keep warm. I don't think, they're persistent hunters, anymore. They've evolved. Let's say the Polynesians, and very explosive, very, just not really lighting up the marathon world, where East Africans are totally lighting up the marathon world. So I think there is genetic predisposition to what we do. And some people, for whatever, you didn't learn the skill of running when you were young, or you didn't hold on to the skill of running, or you've got injured, and for very, very different reasons, you might find that what you want and where you want to be is not quite the reality that you have. And one of the most important things in life is to play cards, or to play life with the cards you have, not the cards you wish you have. Okay, and the sooner you accept your reality and you deal with what you got, the happier you'll be, and the quicker the things you probably want will come to you. So that's kind of my passing messages. You can always, if you overcooking your running, you can always top up your base with walking. And when I say walking, it's just going for a walk. Don't walk fast. Don't go for a brisk walk. Don't stride out. Don't get your heart rate up. Don't try and burn calories. We don't operate from a place of fear and anxiety and lack. Okay, you are enough. You have enough. Go for a walk. Enjoy. Bird watch. Relax your eyes. I'll do proper podcasting walking, and I'll also be more mindful to look at the camera. And I've just sort of realized I probably looked down a little bit more than I should have. So anyway, there we go. There's my thoughts on your aerobic training. Lots and lots of conversation pace. If you can't run at conversation pace with decent form, cheat. Okay, so you're going to run and let your heart rate get up, and then as soon as you feel like you can't hold your form or things get a little too tough, then walk. Okay, and then till your heart rate comes down and you freshen up and you feel you can go again, then run again. And this doesn't mean like sprint running or Tom Cruise running and using your hands. This just means just run and try and make it look easy and make it feel easy. Most of your running should be easy. 86% or 90% of people on Strava don't enjoy running. Well, I tell you why. It's because they're so worried about people and their pace and being judged and how fast they ran and the splits and the Ks that they're basically ruining every single run they have just with emotional drama. Okay, don't be a prisoner in your own mind. Okay, who's the master and who's the servant? Okay, don't let externalities rule your life. You should authentically show up and what you got and rock what you got and be proud of it. Okay, so go out there, have fun, do your thing, and let me know your comments and thoughts and how we can make this podcast better. And much love and respect, and let's just go out there and make the world a better place, one person at a time. But what we do know is it's really, really important that we have an active lifestyle and we keep moving, we keep fit, and we motivate other people to do the same. Okay, take care, and that's it from me.